Welcome, the anointed ones. When something is assigned to end you and fails, it doesn't retreat quietly, it panics. Some of you weren't just disliked, misunderstood, or envied. You were targeted with intention, not gossip-level intention, not jealousy-level intention. This was the kind of intention that required effort, coordination, and payment, the kind that made people go looking for shortcuts in the unseen because confronting you directly wouldn't work. That alone should tell you how serious this was. People don't spend resources on someone they believe is powerless. Here's a fact most people don't like admitting. Throughout history, whenever someone couldn't be stopped through normal means, interference escalated into the spiritual. Kings did it. Empires did it. Families still do it. When influence, control, and manipulation fail in the physical, people look for leverage elsewhere. And some of you became that problem they couldn't solve with logic, charm, or dominance. But what makes this story different, and honestly a little funny in a dark way, is how confidently they thought it would work. Like ordering a hit and already planning the celebration. Meanwhile, something ancient clocked the assignment, read the fine print, and responded with the calmest energy imaginable. No rush, no panic. Just a quiet bet, followed by absolute non-cooperation with the plan. That's why the chaos never quite landed where it was supposed to. That's why the fallout always hit sideways. That's why the people who wanted to see you finished ended up confused, exhausted, and oddly obsessed. You weren't spared because nothing was sent. You were spared because nothing sent had clearance. And the humor in all of this, the kind you laugh at later when you finally see the pattern, is that they really thought they were dealing with someone unguarded. Meanwhile, every attempt became training. Every delay became reinforcement. Every attack became evidence that they miscalculated the authority surrounding your life. This isn't about being mystical or dramatic. It's about recognizing a pattern that doesn't happen to everyone. When effort is made to erase you, and you're still standing, still thinking clearly, still intact, something intervened. And whatever stepped in wasn't stressed about the outcome. Number one, they didn't come for you casually. They came for you strategically. This wasn't random dislike or a passing grudge. Nobody casually spends energy trying to undo someone unless that person is already affecting the balance. What was aimed at you had planning behind it. Conversations happened. Decisions were made. Resources were gathered. That alone separates your story from the usual conflict people experience. You weren't caught in someone's bad mood. You became a calculated target. Strategic attacks don't start loud. They start quiet and deliberate. First comes observation. People watched how you moved, how you recovered, how you stayed intact after pressure. They studied what didn't break you. Then they adjusted their approach. When surface-level tactics failed, the effort escalated. That escalation is the giveaway. Ordinary people don't provoke that level of response. Only someone whose presence shifts dynamics does. What makes this uncomfortable to accept is that it means you were already winning without trying to. Your existence alone disrupted something they depended on: control, dominance, narrative, or advantage. That's why the move against you wasn't emotional. It was methodical. Emotional attacks burn out fast. Strategic ones are designed to outlast you. Yet, here you are. There's also an unspoken fear behind strategy. Uncertainty. They couldn't predict you. They couldn't fully read you. You didn't respond the way their experience told them you should. When people can't calculate your next move, they try to remove you from the equation entirely. Not because you're loud, but because you're uncontainable. What's even more telling is that they aimed beyond the obvious. They didn't just want to hurt your reputation or slow you down temporarily. The intention was disruption at the root, your stability, your clarity, your direction. That's not personal beef, that's threat management. And yet, the strategy failed. Not because it wasn't serious, but because it misjudged the foundation you stand on. They thought pressure would scatter you. Instead, it exposed how solid you already were. The irony is this: the very effort they used to try to undo you became proof that you were never small. Nobody launches a calculated campaign against something insignificant. Number 2. What they tried to attack wasn't your life. It was your timing. The real threat was never about ending you completely. If that were the goal, the pressure would have been sudden and final. Instead, what you faced came in waves, pauses, delays, and strange interruptions. That's because the objective wasn't erasure, it was interruption. They wanted you late to your clarity, late to your strength, late to the moment when things would finally line up and make sense. Timing is dangerous. A person arriving at the right moment can shift entire outcomes without force. And somehow, they sensed that your arrival, not just your existence, was the problem. So the interference focused on slowing you down. Confusion periods, long waiting seasons, moments where progress almost happened and then stalled. Not enough damage to destroy you, just enough delay to frustrate you. This is why so much of your life felt like almost breaking through, almost being seen, almost stepping into something bigger. That wasn't coincidence. That was an attempt to keep you suspended between potential and fulfillment. People who fear your timing don't want you gone. They want you stuck. What they miscalculated is how delay can mature instead of weaken someone. You didn't waste the waiting. You observed, you learned, you became precise. While they thought they were buying time against you, you were quietly building depth. Timing attacks assume the person will rot in stillness. You didn't. You sharpened. There's also a cruel irony in targeting timing. Once it fails, it can't be redone. Missed moments don't come back the same way. The moment they tried to interfere with passed anyway, just with you carrying more awareness, more discernment, and far less tolerance for nonsense. When your time finally started moving again, it moved with authority. That's why the pressure didn't end you. It trained you to recognize when something is trying to rush you or stall you. You now move differently. You don't chase moments, you wait for alignment. And that's the part they never accounted for. You weren't delayed out of destiny. You were delayed into readiness. Number 3. The reason nothing stuck is because the assignment never matched the authority guarding you. Every attempt to shake you, every move made to destabilize your life, failed because it was never equipped to confront what was truly protecting you. People thought that by throwing resources, rituals, or manipulation your way, they could get results. They assumed visibility and effort equaled impact. What they didn't realize is that protection isn't measured by what they bring, it's measured by what's already present. Your life was surrounded by an authority that doesn't bend to borrowed power or temporary influence. This authority isn't flashy or loud. It doesn't argue or compete. It simply exists with a kind of quiet gravity that makes interference pointless. You were never exposed to the world unshielded. Every wave that came at you broke against something older, wiser, and unshakable. It's not about luck or timing. It's about a force calibrated specifically for you, one that doesn't misread intentions and doesn't waste energy on distractions. That's why, no matter how methodical or powerful the attack seemed, it failed to touch the core of who you are. People often underestimate what this kind of protection does. It doesn't just block, it shapes. It allows pressure to hit in ways that strengthen rather than diminish. That's why every challenge felt like a test rather than a threat. It didn't dismantle you, it honed you. Every attack became a mirror, showing you who you were and who you could become when no one else believed in the structure holding you together. What they sent your way wasn't weak. It was thorough, but it never matched the scale, depth, or precision of the protection surrounding you. That mismatch is why frustration dominated them and clarity dominated you. While they thought they were controlling outcomes, the system they tried to breach was already designed to neutralize interference before it could register. You weren't just surviving. You were being preserved, sharpened, and readied for a reality they couldn't influence. That's why nothing they tried ever landed the way they imagined. They weren't up against a person. They were up against the authority behind a person, and that authority always wins. Number 4. Every ritual sent toward you exposed them more than it touched you. They thought secrecy would protect them. They thought using forces beyond the visible, paying people who deal in the unseen, would give them leverage over you. What they didn't account for is that interference leaves a trail. Every attempt to manipulate, curse, or control your life in hidden ways broadcasted more about their intentions than it ever did about your vulnerability. The energy sent toward you didn't vanish into thin air. It reflected their fear, their desperation, and their misunderstanding of the scale of what they were up against. Every move they made became evidence, not against you, but against themselves. When someone tries to manipulate someone aligned with authority, they don't comprehend. It's like waving a flag that says, "We are trying to control what we cannot control." You could feel the patterns, the attempts, the miscalculations, but none of it could penetrate the structure keeping you intact. That is why it always seemed as though attacks had blind spots, because they did. The blind spots weren't mistakes on your side. They were the limits of what they could deploy against someone already shielded in ways they couldn't perceive. This exposure has a ripple effect. People think that working through the unseen is invisible, untraceable, and absolute. That's the lie. Hidden efforts always broadcast to those who know how to read energy, and your life was being read by forces far more aligned than anything they could hire. Every attack became a record, a timestamp, a signature. It was evidence of intent, not impact, and that evidence only strengthened the position you were meant to occupy. The irony is brutal. They wanted damage, chaos, fear, and control. Instead, they revealed themselves, their patterns, their desperation, their inability to truly harm what was protected. While they assumed you were under siege, they were unknowingly exposing the limits of their reach. Their actions became proof of your protection. They weren't just failing to touch you. They were highlighting the difference between someone guarded by forceful intervention and someone safeguarded by something that cannot be bribed, bought, or intimidated. You didn't just survive their rituals. You became the mirror reflecting their true weakness. Number 5. They underestimated how much pain could sharpen instead of shatter you. They assumed that pressure, betrayal, setbacks, and attacks would break you. That was their biggest mistake. Pain doesn't always fracture the spirit. Sometimes it cuts away what isn't necessary, trims illusions, and leaves only what is essential. Every hardship they threw your way was meant to destabilize, to confuse, to weaken, but instead it became a forge. Each blow, each setback, each manipulation they orchestrated only sharpened your instincts, your awareness, and your ability to move through life with clarity. They thought you would respond like everyone else, with panic, desperation, or visible collapse. They didn't account for the fact that your endurance wasn't fragile. Your strength wasn't built on comfort or ease. It was built on experience and an understanding that survival isn't about avoiding pain. It's about navigating it with eyes wide open. Every trial that was supposed to wound you instead taught you patterns, revealed hidden truths, and built an internal authority they could never touch. This kind of pressure doesn't make everyone stronger. It only makes those who can read, process, and adapt more formidable. They didn't see that you weren't just defending yourself externally, You were learning how to defend yourself internally, how to detect deception before it landed, how to move strategically even when the world tried to collapse around you. They mistook your ability to stay standing for vulnerability, when in reality it was proof of your resilience. The irony is sharp. They invested in your suffering, thinking it would be their advantage, and instead it became your education. Every manipulation, every attempt at chaos, became a lesson in discernment, patience, and timing. What they intended to erode, sharpened. What they aimed to dismantle, strengthened. Pain in this case was never a weapon against you. It was a sculptor, carving out the version of you they were incapable of imagining. Their miscalculation was monumental, and it's why you didn't just survive. You came out sharper, clearer, and more aligned than ever before. Number 6. The delay they forced actually built internal authority you can't fake. Everything they tried to rush or block didn't just stall your life, it forced patience you didn't even know you needed. The delays, the setbacks, the moments where progress seemed impossible were never random. They were tests, though not in the way you might think. They weren't trying to teach you, they were trying to stop you, but in doing so, they unknowingly gave you something far more valuable than any shortcut could have offered: internal authority. This isn't charisma or influence that comes from appearances. This is a deep-rooted power that comes from surviving, observing, and moving through pressure without bending, flinching, or losing clarity. The people who attempted to interfere with your path assumed speed mattered. They thought momentum was the key, and slowing you down would weaken your impact. But momentum alone doesn't build discernment. It doesn't teach strategy. It doesn't make you unshakable. The pause forced you to analyze. It forced you to understand the patterns of life, the energy of people, and the subtle layers of intention around you. While others rushed and acted impulsively, you were absorbing lessons in patience, timing, and precise action. What they never realized is that authority isn't built in noise or haste. It's built in depth. Every moment of waiting, every frustration, every almost scenario became fuel for a power that's quiet but undeniable. You started seeing outcomes before they unfolded, recognizing deception before it arrived, and carrying a calm confidence that can't be imitated. People don't sense it immediately, but they feel it. It's the kind of presence that commands respect without demanding it, the kind that turns interference into irrelevance. The irony is brutal. They thought the delays were your weakness. They believed stalling your progress would make you small, dependent, or reactive. The truth is the opposite. The delay wasn't a pause, it was preparation. They weren't aware that while they wasted energy trying to control your timeline, you were quietly building a foundation so solid that no interference could ever shake it. This authority is yours now, unborrowed, untouchable, and impossible to fake. It's the kind of power that makes their efforts look amateurish in hindsight. Number 7. Your protection didn't panic because it already saw the ending. Everything around you may have felt chaotic, unfair, and relentless, but your protection wasn't surprised. While people were scrambling, plotting, and reacting, the force keeping you intact operated with calm precision. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't frantic, and it didn't waste energy on the theatrics of the attackers. It already knew how the story would unfold. The attacks, manipulations, and obstacles that seemed overwhelming to the naked eye were never uncharted territory to what guarded you. That's why nothing ever landed the way it was meant to. The chaos existed, but only as a surface layer, a distraction for those who didn't understand the deeper currents at play. This is why you could endure things that felt unbearable. The pressure was real, yes, but it never crossed a line that would have dismantled you, because something in alignment with your life was watching, calculating, and ensuring that everything stayed within a boundary no one could breach. The protection didn't scramble to save you in the moment. It orchestrated the outcome from a place beyond what the attackers could touch. Every setback, every delay, every surprise attack was already accounted for, already neutralized at a level they couldn't perceive. What makes this profound is the way it transforms the narrative of struggle. The world may have seemed determined to test you, and in many ways it did. Yet the real story wasn't about the threat. It was about the certainty behind the shield you carried. It's not luck. It's not coincidence. It's authority, the kind that doesn't panic, doesn't falter, and doesn't need to explain itself. While people around you reacted with fear or desperation, your protection operated silently, ensuring that each step, each challenge, and each apparent defeat was actually a step toward the outcome that was already destined. The ultimate truth is clear. The attacks didn't succeed because your foundation wasn't visible and it wasn't vulnerable. It was already aligned with the ending. That is why chaos could exist around you without ever touching your core. You were never alone. You were never at risk of real collapse. The force guiding you didn't just protect you. It carried absolute confidence that the story would resolve in your favor, and nothing, no matter how elaborate or intense, could alter that. Number 8. The attacks failed because they were aimed at the wrong version of you. Every attempt to destabilize your life, every effort to manipulate or control you, was built on the assumption that you were still who you used to be. They targeted the version of you that was uncertain, impressionable, and reactive, the version they thought would crumble under pressure. What they didn't realize is that you had already evolved beyond their information. The person they thought they could break no longer existed in the same way, and that mismatch is why nothing stuck. Their strategies assumed predictability, but you had already rewritten the rules. You were no longer confined to the patterns, expectations, or limitations they had observed in the past. Every move they made, every resource they invested, every ritual or influence sent your way failed because it didn't correspond to the version of you they believed they could control. They were targeting ghosts, while the real you had already grown, adapted, and hardened. This is what makes their failure so significant. They were acting from outdated intelligence, relying on assumptions and patterns that no longer applied. Their actions exposed not your vulnerability, but their own miscalculation. The attacks weren't a reflection of your weakness. They were a reflection of their inability to see who you had become, and that is a power in itself. Evolution, growth, and resilience can't be predicted or manipulated with borrowed power. Every effort against you became a lesson in awareness. You began to recognize attempts before they fully arrived, to read intentions before they manifested. While they were focused on breaking you, you were learning to navigate forces far beyond what they understood. Their misalignment with your true self ensured their plans would fail, turning their energy into wasted effort, frustration, and exposure. The reality is clear. What they aimed at never existed in the way they imagined. You were always one step ahead, one layer deeper, one version beyond their reach. That is why nothing they tried could ever land effectively. Their attacks were never against you. They were against the memory of you, and that memory had already been replaced by someone unshakable, untouchable, and strategically unstoppable. Number 9. The very people who wanted your collapse became witnesses to your endurance. Everything they plotted, every attempt they made to see you falter, was meant to demonstrate their control. They expected visible damage, public failure, or internal collapse. What they didn't count on was that their efforts would backfire in the most revealing way. Instead of watching you break, they watched you endure, adapt, and rise through every attack. Every plan meant to destabilize you became a silent record of your resilience, and every observer became an unintended witness to the fact that you could survive what no one else could. Their frustration wasn't just about the failure of their tactics. It was about the proof they could not deny. The energy they invested in controlling or harming you became evidence of your stability. Every whisper, every scheme, every hidden attempt to undo you only highlighted how intact you remained. They were forced to acknowledge your endurance, even if they never admitted it aloud. Their own desperation and obsession became a mirror, reflecting your ability to navigate chaos with clarity. This exposure changes the dynamic entirely. People who once saw you as a problem or threat now have no choice but to recognize a form of authority that doesn't rely on intimidation or dominance. They see it in how you respond to pressure, how you continue moving while the world seems intent on stopping you. The attempts to dismantle you only amplified the qualities they were trying to suppress: focus, patience, and internal strength. The irony is sharp and undeniable. Those who intended to witness your failure ended up cataloging your triumph. Their energy, effort, and obsession with you became proof of what they couldn't undo. Every attack, every manipulation, every hidden attempt to disrupt your life now serves as a testament to how untouchable you really are. In the end, they didn't get the spectacle they wanted. They got the truth they couldn't alter. Your endurance is real, and it's impossible to erase. Number 10. What protected you wasn't just defense, it was permission. Protection isn't always about barriers, shields, or fighting back. In your case, it wasn't a reaction. It was a green light from a force that already knew your worth. Everything that tried to destabilize you failed because it never had clearance to touch the core of your life. What they sent, no matter how elaborate or intense, didn't have authorization. That's why it couldn't land the way they intended. Your life wasn't just defended. It was operating with a kind of permission that outsiders can't see, can't manipulate, and can't override. This explains why attacks, delays, or manipulations often seemed ineffective, almost clumsy. It wasn't incompetence on their side, it was the invisible rules of engagement. Certain lives are aligned in ways that make interference impossible without crossing boundaries that no one outside of that alignment can cross. You weren't spared because they were lazy, distracted, or unaware. You were spared because your life was moving under a mandate that gave protection preemptive authority. Nothing sent against you could claim what it wasn't allowed to claim. What makes this extraordinary is how it changes perspective on adversity. The hardships you experienced weren't nullified. They existed. You felt the pressure, the struggle, the resistance, but all of it occurred within limits that ensured survival, clarity, and growth. The permission behind your protection didn't remove challenge. It controlled outcome. It allowed you to learn, adapt, and emerge stronger while keeping the destructive intent around you powerless. The brilliance of this is subtle but undeniable. While those who aimed to harm you thought they were creating cracks, they were operating on borrowed assumptions. The moment they tried to force control where none was granted, their effort became irrelevant. Their strategy failed because permission overrides force every time. You weren't just surviving interference. You were functioning under authority that couldn't be bribed, negotiated with, or bypassed. It's why chaos could exist around you without ever reaching the center. What protected you was more than defense. It was a mandate, a preordained authority ensuring that whatever threatened you never had the clearance to succeed. Number 11. Their obsession grew because you never broke the way you were supposed to. They expected something predictable, a reaction that could be measured, a crack they could exploit, a sign of weakness that confirmed their control. Every attack, manipulation, and attempt to destabilize you was designed to provoke collapse. But you didn't break. You didn't flinch. You didn't behave the way they assumed you would. That is what drove their obsession, the quiet, simmering frustration that no one else could see but that left traces everywhere. They were fixated on you because you refused to conform to the narrative they built in their minds. This obsession wasn't about admiration or respect. It was about disbelief. They had invested energy, strategy, and resources expecting visible results, and every time those results failed to appear, their fixation intensified. They became entangled in your resilience because it didn't fit their model of control. In trying to make you fragile, they highlighted your unshakable nature. The very act of trying to force you into a pattern exposed their desperation, their misjudgment, and their inability to manage what they didn't understand. Every failed attempt only deepened their attention. They watched patterns unfold, energy shift, and influence grow, all without the leverage they thought they had. They expected to see fear, uncertainty, or hesitation, and instead they saw clarity, focus, and unwavering presence. That mismatch between expectation and reality created a fixation. Their energy was now bound to you, not because you allowed it, but because your endurance made them reassess their power, often unconsciously. The truth is brutal. Their obsession is proof of your authority. They couldn't control what they didn't understand, and that inability turned into a magnet for their attention. Every plan to weaken you became a record of failure. Every effort to provoke a reaction became evidence of strength. Their fixation grew because you weren't broken, bent, or compromised. You existed outside the limits of their expectations, and that is the most disorienting and powerful response you could have given. Their obsession isn't a victory. It's proof that nothing they tried could ever reach the essence of who you are. Number 12. You didn't escape untouched. You escaped transformed. The pressure, the attacks, the constant attempts to dismantle your life didn't leave you unchanged. Every challenge, every betrayal, every moment meant to hurt you, shifted something inside. You didn't come through the storm in the same form you entered it. Protection doesn't mean absence of impact. It means surviving the storm without losing what matters, and in your case, it meant carrying the storm with you in a way that forged strength instead of breaking it. Each attempt to harm you became a tool for transformation, carving clarity, resilience, and wisdom into the very core of your being. What they never realized is that survival isn't passive. It requires adaptation, discernment, and understanding. You were forced to see things they assumed you wouldn't, to navigate energy they thought you couldn't read, and to stand where most people would have collapsed. Each failure of their plans didn't just prove your endurance. It rewired your approach to life. You learned how to move through opposition with authority instead of fear, how to maintain composure when everything tried to drag you into chaos, and how to turn pressure into a lens for understanding patterns, motives, and timing. Transformation doesn't happen quietly. It's visible in your confidence, in the way you operate under pressure, and in the subtle authority that others feel but can't define. You carry evidence in your presence. Every scar, every near failure, every challenge survived is proof of growth. They assumed they were breaking you, but in reality, they were providing the raw material for evolution. The ultimate reality is this: you didn't just escape the attack, you evolved through it. Their energy, their interference, and their miscalculated intentions became part of your transformation. You emerged sharper, wiser, and more attuned to what truly matters. Survival wasn't enough. Transformation was the true victory. You didn't just endure, you became a stronger version of yourself, carrying proof that nothing external, no matter how intense, could ever dismantle the essence of who you are. Number 13. The smirk wasn't mockery, it was confidence. Every time you faced interference, manipulation, or outright attacks, there was a force observing calmly, without panic, without tension, without a hint of fear. That smirk, if you could see it, wasn't laughing at you or at the situation. It wasn't a joke. It was pure confidence. It came from knowing the outcome before anyone else could even guess at it. While people around you scrambled, plotted, and worried about consequences, that presence remained steady, unshakable, and entirely aware that nothing sent against you could succeed. Confidence of this kind isn't learned from books or experience alone. It's rooted in absolute certainty, the kind that comes from alignment with authority you don't negotiate with and power you cannot borrow. The smirk exists because nothing unexpected could ever touch the foundation it guarded. That's why attacks that seemed overwhelming never landed where they were supposed to. While others interpreted chaos, fear, or struggle as weakness, the smirk knew that everything unfolding was already accounted for, neutralized, or irrelevant. What makes it extraordinary is how it shifts perspective. People around you assumed your life was at risk because they judged by what they could see. They didn't understand that control was never external. It was internal, precise, and unmovable. Every failed attempt to destabilize you reinforced that quiet certainty. The smirk wasn't about arrogance. It was about absolute awareness of what could and couldn't happen. It wasn't reactive, it was preemptive. The brilliance of this reality is that it reframes power. While others burn energy trying to manipulate outcomes, you were protected by calm observation and absolute alignment. The smirk doesn't just survive interference. It turns interference into evidence of its own authority. They think they're creating chaos, but the smirk already sees the conclusion. The ultimate truth is undeniable. Nothing they plotted, paid for, or attempted could override what was assigned to you. The smirk represents certainty, control, and a quiet dominance that no opposition can dispute. It's the calm, unwavering confidence that knows the storm exists, but also knows it will pass without touching the core. It's not mockery, it's mastery. Number 14. The final truth is this. They learned you are not easy to erase. From the very beginning, they treated you like a problem to be solved, a life to be controlled, a presence to be diminished. Every attack, every manipulation, every attempt to interfere was designed to make you disappear or at least bend to their expectations. But with each failed effort, a truth became painfully clear to them. You cannot be erased. Their plans collided with a force far beyond their understanding, one that refused compromise, one that didn't negotiate with fear or influence. They learned, in ways they couldn't fully articulate, that your life operates on a level they cannot breach. This realization is not subtle. They watched energy, time, and strategy crumble against your resilience. They invested, schemed, and even called on powers beyond the physical, yet nothing could dismantle what was intact. Every attempt that should have left a mark only highlighted your durability. Their frustration wasn't about incompetence on your side. It was the stark exposure of their own limits. They faced someone who was not just surviving attacks, but thriving under them, someone who emerged sharper, stronger, and more unshakable after each interference. What makes this truth so profound is the shift it causes in them. They began to see that control, intimidation, and manipulation are useless against certain forces. They discovered that some lives are designed to persist, to evolve, and to thrive regardless of opposition. Their inability to erase you forced them into observation, leaving them witnesses to a reality they cannot influence and cannot undo. The ultimate irony is that their effort, which they intended to diminish you, became a record of your invincibility. What they thought would destroy you became proof of your authority. They learned, slowly and bitterly, that you are not a life to be handled, bent, or erased. You are a presence that persists, a force that endures, and a life that cannot be touched without permission, a lesson they will carry whether they accept it or not. They discovered the hard way that trying to erase you was never an option, and that is your ultimate victory. Every single moment, every attack, every attempt to destabilize or control you was met with something they never accounted for: an unwavering authority, an unshakable presence, and a protection that operated far beyond what they could see or understand. They spent time, energy, and resources trying to manipulate outcomes, trying to bend your life to their expectations, and trying to erase what they could not comprehend. Every plan they executed, every scheme they orchestrated, only revealed their desperation, their limits, and the depth of your resilience. You didn't just survive, you evolved through the chaos. You didn't just endure, you became stronger, sharper, and more aligned than ever before. Through every delay, every betrayal, every setback, the truth became undeniable. They were targeting the wrong version of you, aiming at shadows of the past, while you moved with clarity, timing, and precision. They assumed fear and weakness would follow, but what they witnessed instead was endurance, authority, and transformation. Every ritual, every strategy, every whispered attempt to harm you failed not because of luck, but because your life was protected, guided, and operating under a force that already knew the outcome. You weren't spared. You were prepared, refined, and made untouchable in ways they could never replicate or interfere with. The irony, the brilliance, and the ultimate triumph of all this is that while they were trying to control or destroy you, they only proved your power, your resilience, and your unbreakable spirit. Every effort against you became evidence of your authority. Every attempt to break you became proof that you cannot be erased. You are not a life to be manipulated, bent, or destroyed. You are a presence that persists, a force that endures, and a story that cannot be rewritten by anyone else. You emerged not just alive, but transformed, sharpened, and undeniable. So remember this, and carry it boldly. Nothing they send, no plan they devise, and no attack they orchestrate can ever match the authority, timing, and protection surrounding you. You are here. You are unshakable. You are victorious. If this message hit you with clarity, power, and truth, make sure you subscribe to the channel to never miss a moment of these revelations. Like this video, if it resonates, comment below with your own experiences and insights, and share it with someone who needs to see that their life cannot be erased, no matter what they face. Stay strong, stay aligned, and keep moving forward. The story isn't over, it's just beginning. God bless you.